now call this workshop of the Jacksonville City Council to order. And council, you were provided with a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adopt this agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And next we have the adoption of minutes and consent items. The 4 consent items you see on your agenda and the April 21st, 2026 regular meeting.
Good.
I'll make a motion, we accept the consent item.
Second.
Minutes.
And approve the minutes.
Sorry. That's okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Go down to number 5, which is the budget discussion for the FY27 budget. And Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. I did have one handout that I passed out to council. It should be sitting at your seat for tonight. This council meeting is regularly scheduled meeting and a discussion for council to discuss the FY27 proposed budget. We had meetings scheduled last week with some members of the council, and there were some questions asked basically comparing the tax rates for next year. And the questions were basically, what would the levy be based on each tax rate that's on the sheet here? So we've given you a couple of things to review on this page, and this will be the information that you can use for your discussion. At the bottom of that page, you see that the FY26 tax base is $4.2 billion. Right below that, you see the reval FY27 tax base is $6.4 billion. You'll see that the FY26 tax rate is at 60 cents. That's our current tax rate. That is 60 cents per $100 of valuation. And then below that, you'll see the FY27 revenue neutral rate. That's the tax rate by which the council would set to bring in the same amount of revenue as the current fiscal year, utilizing the new valuation, which is 44.31 cents. In the columns at top, you'll see tax rates on the left-hand side going from the current tax rate of 60 cents down to the revenue neutral rate of 44.31. And then in the middle column, you're going to see the FY26 tax levy based on the 26 tax base. And then you'll see the FY27 tax levy based on the revaluation and those tax rates. Mayor, that's the only information provided from the request from last week.
Okay, so right now, there's a bill in the legislature that has put a stop on the tax valuations for this year. Is that correct?
Yes, there's been proposed in the Senate to pause the FY26 county revaluations, and hopefully the legislature will vote at some point during this session on that bill.
And our budget needs to be approved by June 30th.
June 30th, yes, sir.
So it kind of leaves us a little bit in the lurch here, knowing what kind of revenue we're going to have versus, what we're going to be able to do with the budgetary items, the expenditures that are required for this coming budget year. Kind of puts us in a unknown territory.
Right.
So with this tax levy comparisons here, it gives you some idea of what different pennies on a tax rate would make, what difference it would make here. Discussion?
Mr. Ray, I have a question for you. If the reval is being delayed, has the legislature said whether or not if they are willing to move that June 30th deadline so that municipalities would be able to go back and assess and refigure their fiscal budget?
No, ma'am. So part of this is not going into committee yet. And the assumption from the league is when it gets into one of the first two committees, that'll be one of the questions that will be presented to the Senate, because it'll be heard there first before it gets out of the Senate and goes over to the House. As soon as we have that information, I think that gives us that foundation. But hopefully, as I said to the mayor, hopefully they vote on this item sooner rather than later, because without it, you're sitting in limbo. So as soon as we have that update, Dr. Washington, I'll send that out to council as well. You do have that ability to, for example, if the council were to adopt a budget on the May 19th council meeting, you still have up until June 30th to adopt a new budget resolution that could move numbers, move the budget, move a tax rate, but we don't have any information from the legislature.
And their session ends in August, correct? So
It's scheduled to
this
go
could be
through-
extended all the way into August, into the next fiscal year, correct?
Yes, sir, it could.
Because it really handicaps our decision-making. I mean, it puts us kind of in a jam.
I remember the process back in 2013 when we had decided on the budget, and then we had to go back and modify, what was it, almost 3 million we had to cut?
2.6.
3 million. That wasn't a very easy process to go through.
Well, it's my understanding that Senator Berger is kind of holding things up there based upon the hospital. And so it's hard to tell. So it seems to me that one of the things that we should do is look at, have two budgets ready, really. One that relates to the 26 tax levy and one that represents the 27.
I mean, that would be one way to do it. I was in conference with the attorney and the manager earlier, and looking at this, these rate comparisons here, looking at a lesser tax rate, go from 60 to 56, and use fund balance, we could continue on with the same budget that we have now. But again, you would be using fund balance to fill in the gaps there. It was around 3.8 million or something like that. Was that what we said?
At different rates, you're going to have that reduction of 3.8 if you're moving the tax rate down, Mayor. If you use the FY26 evaluation, the reval, or use the eval, and try to get back up to the current level, the 28, 29 million, then theoretically, you'd have to increase the tax rate $0.08. You'd have to go from 60 to 68 theoretically, Mayor. Back to Mr. Yannero's comment of if you're running another budget with the current, before this reval's completed, you'd have to increase that up to generate that amount of revenue to have the budget at that level.
You're talking about going up to 38, or you're talking about 68 cents to get up to the 27 at 60 cents.
Yeah, it'll basically get you up to that point where you're having that same baseline.
I don't know if that would be very eligible for a lot of people.
No. I mean, and
28 million.
Right, that's what we're saying. They get you to that bottom level.
28 million, not to 38 million. You would have to raise the current tax rate using the current reval, the one from 26. You'd have to raise that almost 8 cents to get to 28,604,000. And that is $10 million less than we built the budget on right now. So we'd have to remove $10 million of expenses out of the draft budget that you're looking at.
well, in that budget, there are some things that we could postpone and look at. I mean, I think we need to think about that in terms of, are there some projects that can be moved to the next year's budget? And when we talk about the 400 acres, we had some discussion about the paving of the streets. I know that some of that comes out of water and sewer to do some of the infrastructure, but the street infrastructure, can we move that to another year? Because, it's my hope that the county supports this project and will help us fund part of it. So if that's the case, then can we, are there some things that we can move to next year's budget? When I look at some of the stuff in CIP, I mean, to me, there are some things, about $1 million that we could kind of look at in '27. I know that there's some needs there, but obviously there's some things that we could look at to.
Did you have any in particular? Because 1 million versus the 10 million.
I know, it's, but that's just in the CIP. There's some other things I think in the budget that we could look at maybe and try to reduce it so that we can, because one thing I don't want to see is that we are, because a lot of folks in our community are on fixed incomes. And so how can we make sure that, we're not hurting those folks and looking at this in a more strategic manner this year versus and next year based upon what we kind of got stuck with here.
Other than the 400 acres, what are some of the other suggestions from your review?
I think there's, there's, I think I highlighted them in here that just have to find them.
While he's looking at that, I guess one of my biggest concerns is, and I said this before, is if we pick a rate and then we get locked into that bill passes, then we're stuck with it for a while. That's what kind of alarms me, because then, that's something we have to deal with for years, not just this year. We can't go back and fix that. So that's what my biggest concern about making a decision with that leaning over our heads.
I mean, the Beirut Memorial sign was one of those things. The common softball field, if we can move that.
I think that's
You're
what
talking
we've
about
done.
the Miracle Field?
No, I'm talking about the additional farm. And, also the upgrades of the range. I realize that those are necessary, but we may be able to postpone that for a year based upon, the quandary that we're in. Obviously, from a public safety standpoint, I'm sure the mayor can agree. I mean, those are needed. It's just, my concern is especially folks in our community that have fixed incomes, making sure that because of this quandary that the legislature has put us in, making sure that we're looking at everything that we can do to keep the tax rate as low as we can.
So with that said, is there some time that y'all can take a look at the budget as it currently exists and take out some of those things or move them into out years? Or?
So there's a couple things, Mayor. So we can definitely run two parallel budgets and show the property tax base and the rates, and then show this is what the number would be and this is what the fund balance appropriation would need to be as presented, and we can give you that number, and then you can compare that to what's been proposed here. I think that goes back to Mr. Yannero's point. The other challenge, the police range, that is one item that's budgeted at about $100,000. The other two items, I'd have to look back here in a second to see if they're scheduled for next year or if they've already been appropriated from previous budgets. Some of these items that are scheduled for construction this year are already approved by council and moving forward. So the other items that we have in for the CIP for this year, the Miracle Field, which council's moved that project forward, and then the Uptown project that's moving forward. We do have additional funds on water and sewer projects. That's not tax rate specific, that's utility specific. So those items. The challenge with the CIP, Mayor, is other than the Uptown project, that's the largest big ticket item. So for example, if that police range is $100,000, on the current tax rate, that's basically 1/4 cent of the tax rate. On the new reval, that's basically 1/6. So when you're looking at that impact in the rate, that's not the number that impacts the rate significantly.
Definitely have to look at the Uptown.
You're gonna have to look at
Make any type of
something.
change,
Yes,
any
ma'am.
type of
It's
adjustment.
going to have to be a big item, not little.
And so for Uptown next year, back to Mr. Sosa's question and Mr. Yannero's, for Uptown, you do have things moving forward in terms of the water and sewer. So that, as we're going to do some groundwork there, we can move forward on the water and sewer. The challenge is if council wants to go out for a funding package, then we have to have all that package together. That would show how you're going to pay for it. The concept of the county or the state or any other partners being able to come to the table until they give us that financial commitment, it's a wish. And I don't know what the county's going to do with their proposed budget. Sorry.
They signed a resolution to support it, but no, a figure has been assigned to that. It's just, yeah, we'll help, but we don't know how much yet or when. Just for the public's knowledge, as well as those of us in the room, when we set this rate, we are required to do so legally by June 30th, and when is the next time we can touch it to make an adjustment?
After June 30th? Yeah, you can't touch it unless there's a couple things, a couple scenarios by the state, and one of those would be the state coming in and taking over control of our financial operations.
So how many years are we indeed stuck with?
You're in for a year.
1
Every
year.
tax rate that the council sets annually sets basically for a year, and then the council has to come back the next year in your budget ordinance and look at it again. So council sets the tax rate every year within the budget.
So 1 year, not 3 or 4, but a full year.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So we can run those scenarios, Mayor, and we'll send that out to council in an email that shows you a couple of those scenarios, and then you'll have that for the next meeting as well.
Running duels is not a bad idea. My concern is that we're still going to run up against June 30th, and the legislature will not have moved anything enough for us to know what they're going to do. Hopefully, we'll get some feedback from committee, but if we don't, we're going to be in exactly the same bucket with exactly the same problem, in May or June.
I just hate to leave it at 60 cents and then
Yeah.
that fail, and then us being and I realize we could change it next year and reduce it down.
Full year.
But that doesn't help people with this year's tax bill.
I would rather lower it, and not to where we can't survive it, of course, but I would rather lower it to the point that if that were to go through, we would be hurting a little bit and have a larger fund balance appropriation for 1 year than to lay that on citizens to pay extra above what they needed to, just because we didn't know what was going to happen and then we're stuck with it.
And I would agree with that.
But, yeah, that's why I
It's
was,
got to be somewhere in a moderate middle, because we can't bankrupt the city or overtax the citizens. We've got to find that sort of happy medium of tolerance where we can tolerate less if we get it, and it's not too painful for our citizens, because
And I realize it,
mystery meets no fun.
like even the Commons parking lot rehab, obviously that needs to be done, but is it possible to put those things off for 1 year and, based upon this quandary? Because if we don't know what the tax rate is, then it's going to be very difficult for us to. And I realize that those are all important things that need to, just like the ball fields, I think, I mean, there is a challenge with those ball fields, so, but, if we have to put things off, and even a part of the infrastructure for the 400 acres, if that needs to be delayed, or if we need to look at the bonds and put them out a year so that we can, put them out where we're going from 20 years to 30 years. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I think that's more of a,
And in order to do that,
you'll see the needle move more.
Yeah.
Mayor, and that's one of the discussions that Mr. Nero brought up last week, was the ability to move. Typically, a capital project of this size would have a 20-year term. And so the question was, can you take that out to a 25 or 30? Speaking with our financial advisors, we feel confident that based on the amount and the size of this project, we can move it to the longer term. And so part of our dialogue historically has been, you spread out the cost to citizens for many years, and this is something, Mayor, that you've said before in terms of the ability to share that load, not just front-load it on citizens, but you spread it out just like how the Commons project is. And that's one of the things that that Ms. Smith had said last week in terms of the dialogue of being able to lower down your debt service. It may result in a larger payment over time, which a lot of us know that in terms of a mortgage, but it would lessen the annual impact. Therefore, the need on the debt service payment would be lower. So if we're thinking of a debt service payment being between $3 and $4 million a year, and that theoretically could be 8 to 10 cents, you could knock it down. Let's say it's 6 to 8 cents. You would effectively lower that. So back to Mr. Guerrero's point, that could be 3 or 4 cents on the tax rate right now.
And if we were to do that, to extend those projects out, how would that affect our credit rating?
So that's the bigger concern, that in terms of the projects that we have now, we don't have a concern about credit rating and the ability to fund those projects. Our big concern is how do we expand the tax base with the Uptown Jacksonville project? So we should not, based on the plan that we have in place, the council's reviewed before, have a concern because we've looked at the capital planning model. After the 25 or 30-year term, whatever the length, the longer term is, I believe we'll still have a good credit rating, but we will not have the borrowing capacity because we won't have additional revenues per the capital planning model. So when we're talking about finishing up some of the projects that we're doing now so that we can move into this very large project, that's where our eggs are going to be. They're going to be in that large project to be able to have the borrowing capacity based on our credit rating to make that project happen. That's a great point, Dr. Washington. That's going to be the impact of a large loan, a large debt service that we're going to have to carry for a longer term.
But if we moved it out for 30 years, and then we, obviously, we're going to sell some of that property, the cost of selling that property, and then if the county and the state provide us funding, then can we lower that debt by?
So theoretically, what could happen is every time, if we have that debt, let's say we have a $60 million debt for the project, for that first phase of the project, and then the county appropriates $20 million. Just pick a random, extremely high number that probably is not going to happen. Theoretically, the council at any point could retire some of that debt with that money, and then potentially, at the point that it can be, you're not really refinancing it, but you'd go back out on that. So you could use that to pay down the debt service year over year, depending on what the parameters are on that. This large bonding, this project has a different repayment type plan. There are a lot of different stipulations that go out, and it's a lot market-based in terms of what the rates are in the repayment schedule. It's not your typical, we're going out to a mortgage and we can pay off the mortgage without a penalty. You have some other requirements that would impact your bonding capacity and your rating.
To me, extending the life of the large project and working to see if we can't get some collaboration from our partners at the county and state level makes a lot more sense. And we also, there are some things that we could kick down a year, but then that bottlenecks the CIP and we have just more to deal with later. If it's small stuff, it just stacks up, and so that's a risk we take as well. So the moving the bigger egg, if you will make the biggest impact, and it's also where we have the most flexibility. It's just going to have the greatest impact, and it's something our community has been needing for years and asking for years, and we all, Jacksonville deserves more, and we all, but it's something that we can affect the timeline on to make sure that we don't hurt folks in the short term without creating a bottleneck potentially with the CIP down the road.
They were able to continue moving on with the other projects, which we know we need to get done.
Well, but the other side of that coin is every year we're not going to be in this quandary that's been caused by the legislature. And, I think there's opportunity to look at that as those other projects. And, it just depends on the budget. If we keep the 60 cents and it's based on what our current values are rather than the revals, then, what does our budget look like at what was that figure?
Yeah, even at that current rate of 25 million for the year overall, what's it look like at that point?
Yeah.
And we'll run that. We'll give you the comparisons.
I mean, I think one of the most important things, for me anyway, is, the issues that we've had with the pay and fixing the pay is paramount for me, because I think, competition is steep for our employees, and we need to make sure that they're being compensated correctly. And I think that needs to be obviously the forefront. The second part is how do we go forward with the 400 acres? Because what I see with the 400 acres is this ability to increase our revenue through, selling that property. The Uptown project, as far as the commercial part, would increase our sales tax revenue and our ad valorem taxes.
It's an investment, not an expense.
Right.
It will pay us back.
And so I see that as being able to keep our tax rate lower. And so I think those are the two important projects that really needs, to me, I need some additional information. Because I learned as my 30 years as a police administrator, you got to have all the information before you make a decision. And I think that those are things that we can look at to improve our strategic approach toward this.
Good thing we got
Nothing's more costly than turnover.
a little bit more time.
Mr. Ray, has the county commissioners said anything about what their tax rate is going to be for this year as of yet?
No, ma'am. So one of the things is the county typically doesn't have a proposed budget until the first part of May. So we've not seen that. It could have happened today, but I'm not aware of that today. So we've only heard informal dialogue from individual county commissioners of where they think that would be. From our numbers, just like where our revenue neutral rate is approximately 44 cents, we would estimate their revenue neutral to be at approximately 49 cents, and they're currently at 65 cents. So in theory, they have the same 16-cent swing in between those two numbers. So we don't have a clue, Dr. Washington, where they're going to be at this point.
Because, one of the things that I'm also thinking about too is if our General Assembly caps our ad valorem, and we already know what the sales distribution tax is 100% of that, and if it's capped, where do we find that extra revenue in order to make the wheels of our financial budget go very smoothly? Because then we will need to look at line items and what we need to possibly cancel and eliminate, as opposed to moving it further down the line, because our funding is going to be restricted in more ways than one.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger concern that we have, Dr. Washington, is if there are other bills being talked about at the state right now that could limit our tax rate, that could limit our ability to use the valuation or the level at which the valuation can increase every 4 years, 2 years, or 8 years. And so if the council were to set a tax rate this year, the General Assembly could then set a limit on either the rate, the valuation, or even the levy for next year. They could say something as, you can only increase your tax levy year over year by up to 3%. That's some of the proposals that we've heard. We haven't seen a bill to that point. We haven't seen a bill on limiting the overall tax rate, but we have heard some discussion. Currently, there's a limit in the state that you can't have a tax rate greater than $1.50 per $100. Well, we're nowhere close to that. We're at less than half of that number. So that's not something that would impact the city of Jacksonville. But some of these things do have concerns for staff as well about what next year would look like. So I think you're spot on in nailing it. That it's not just this year; it's next year. And then to comment back on Mr. Yanera's comment, theoretically, let's say that we're looking at a $3 to $3.5 million debt service payment on that project based on the 20-year term. Random numbers, Mayor, just trying to capture that. So if we're going to 3 and 3.5, maybe we lower that down to about 2.3 or 2.4 a year, theoretically. Or if you go out to 30, maybe you're up to 3.3, 3.4 with your interest in the longer term, right? So you could free up some of those funds over the longer term. I would say maybe $800 to $1 million a year at a best case scenario, and that's not compounding anything annually because I forget that equation.
So some of those projects that were adopted in this year's budget, like I was looking at the car wash or the vehicle wash. I understand that's important, but that's $3 million.
That's funded by grant funding.
Okay.
So when you look at some of these projects, like a transit project or a water and sewer project, or when you said the fields earlier, that $25,000 for the softball field, that's design money. So that's $25,000 towards design. So that makes sense. You would kick that out 1 year, so you're not spending that in 27. You'd then spend the design money in 28, hope to go to construction by 29.
And some of the money that's funding some of those capital projects is out of the capital reserve, which is something that's set aside. We normally don't use that to pay operational expenses. So you'd basically be transferring your capital reserve back in to the unrestricted budget so that you could use it for your annual budget.
But is there an opportunity to go through all those projects that were funded this year and look at the ones that haven't been funded or that haven't been bid out and are in the process, and looking at saving some money here so we could preserve first the employees' compensation, and two, that project?
Yes, sir. So if anything hasn't gone through the bidding process or has been awarded a contract by council, then yes, we can review all of those projects that have not gone through that process and been awarded can be reviewed. Yes, sir. Always an option. And we do that a lot in the CIP. That's why when you see the capital improvement plan year over year, you'll see some of those projects being moved out. For example, when we were talking about the CIP during our last presentation, one of the comments was we moved some of those projects out either entirely or we moved them out to 7 or 8 years down, because when you saw the capital planning model that Sabrina presented, those items have been kicked out. Why? Because we didn't have the capacity to have additional funds to fund those projects. So you have to move them.
So is there a timeline you want to bring this back to us as a redo?
Mayor, based on all of our comments tonight and any more questions you have now, we're going to work towards bringing this back to you as soon as possible in an email, and then it'll be on the next agenda as well. So we're going to leave it on for the 19th, and so council can continue to discuss there, and you can always take action or not take action, but we'll send these comments we have so far, we'll send this all out to you. And the other thing it'll give us, back to Dr. Washington's point, it'll at least give us another 2 weeks to listen to any dialogue that we may get from the state, from the General Assembly. I tell you from Ms. Smith's comments before, and she had the opportunity to visit with 2 of our legislators at least, that would give us more insight individually, but that's 2 out of the masses. So it's real challenging to see where that's going to take us.
But we'll be on the mark to be able to go either way, right?
We'll be ready to give you those parallels and put it out there for council to look at and review, and then send us additional comments.
So hopefully they will make a decision in the legislature before then. It'll make everything a lot easier, but I ain't gonna count on it.
Mayor, and on the other side, if you have any influence at the county level, if anybody has that, and there's the opportunity for them to fund the project with a commitment, that would be fantastic. That allows, back to Ms. Ginero's point, that allows us to utilize that inside of our funding strategy The other side is for next year, we hope that there'll be some additional dialogue with the county commission on the sales tax appropriation. So as we look at that, we've presented this multiple times, but based on the county's chosen method of sales tax distribution, the city of Jacksonville, roughly, Dr. Washington said it earlier, approximately $3 million, and that was 2013. Well, now at this point, we're up to $9, $10, $11 million that the city doesn't have because the method is based on the ad valorem distribution method and not the per capita method. And we know that Jacksonville is the hub for retail and commercial in Onslow County, yet we miss out on those revenues, and the county is a large benefactor of all the dollars people are spending inside the city.
And I'll piggyback on that because, when you look at the sales tax or the ad valorem way, it's North Topsail Beach and Surf City that are really gaining. And most of those folks don't even live here. Most of them are not generating, they're renting those houses out. And that's where most of our sales tax revenue is going toward. So, from my standpoint, why would we spend money on, or give our sales tax revenue, which is generated here in the city? Because North Topsail Beach has like 1-2 restaurants. And in Onslow County, I don't think in Surf City there's any establishments that are getting that. So why are we sending our sales tax revenue, which is generated here, and it should be used for paying for services here, to North Topsail and Surf City? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Because, I would think that we take that $11 million, we could lower the tax rate no matter what happens, if they would change their revenue stream. And my understanding is that it won't affect the county at all. It won't affect Richlands, it won't affect Swansboro, Holly Ridge.
Yeah, so Mayor, it does affect the county, which is part of their concern, but it would allow the council to reset our tax rate, if you wanted to, 15 cents. So when you're looking at the tax rate, if you're at 60 cents now, based on that amount, you could be at 45, just if you had those revenues from the sales tax, and you could use that. So back to Dr. Washington's point earlier, you're looking for another revenue stream. I think Mr. Willingham made it months ago. This is the only revenue stream that we are aware of that has any viability that the state has discussed that would create a revenue generator for the city. And without that change, the state's a question mark right now, but this is a handcuff.
What's the tax rate in North Topsail Beach now?
I think they're in the low 20s, Mayor. And
Based upon our sales tax going to them.
Yeah, and they receive approximately $4.5 million a year, and we receive $17 million in sales tax.
Costs a lot of money to reclaim sand.
I know. And that's where, both Surf City, Pender County, and North Topsail are using it to put sand on the beach rather than pay for the services for our citizens. And we need to encourage our citizens to get hold of the county commission and tell them to change that. Because we're paying for sand on a beach. As a city resident, I'm paying for sand on a beach that, I shouldn't be paying for. Especially when they're using that sand on the beach to attract people to rent their houses.
We have to remember too, when that renourishment program kind of belly up, you got to find the money from somewhere, right? So connect the dots.
We're paying for sand on a beach and struggling to pay for public safety and all the other needs.
Awful lot of voters that live inside the city of Jacksonville, and every single one of us vote for our county commissioners. So we have a voice there. We need to use it. You're right. Our citizens need to reach out to the county commissioners and express concern about this issue and ask them to look at it and reevaluate. Even if they would do a hybrid we would be a lot better off. If they don't want to switch from 100% ad valorem to 100% per capita, if they would do a 60-40 split, it would help us tremendously. And we could stair step from there if they agree and if it's helpful, and we can work through it from there. But this 100% ad valorem is causing 4 communities in Onslow County to lose revenue every year, so that a couple other ones benefit. And I'm sure they
Where
had
it's
their
generated.
reasons. but
Where it is
it's-
generated.
Yes, it's leaving where it's generated and where the services are delivered and the streets are driven on and the things need repair and going elsewhere.
I believe with the 60-40 split, the county wasn't injured, correct?
Man, that's correct. So, yeah.
You have the 60-40.
Yeah, when we had the 60-40, even now, our estimates say that the county would be what we would call held harmless. So they would be at the same revenue level that they are for FY26 and FY27 if they did a split using the hybrid, which the General Assembly granted them, to use ad valorem and per capita together in a formula. And then we would still be roughly, let's say, 5 million to the positive. So roughly 9 cents on a tax rate.
Better than zero. Those calculations of held harmless were based on the revals and existing rates, were they not?
Yes.
So if the revals freeze and the rate drops, all of those figures change.
Every figure changes if it's based on the current valuation. But back to your earlier point, it's still going to be greater than the 3 million, significantly.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it was when County Commissioner Lionel Midget, when he passed away, that's when it was changed, because he was the one that basically was the proponent of the 60-40 sales distribution.
Is there some way, Mayor, sir, that we could, council could sit down with the commissioners regarding our sales tax? I mean, I hear telling the public, but isn't that a responsibility we have?
We have worked hard to try to get that done. It's not like it's not been brought up in conversation. It's been brought up in meetings. We actually have bi-monthly meetings with the county manager and the chair. We've talked about the sales tax on many occasions. We got a lot of empty promises along the way. But again, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it's just been a arduous task to try to get them to move off of it. Best time to get them is an election year. But then once election year, you get all the promises in the world. After election year is gone, they forget about it. So, and not singling out any one commissioner, but it's just been a hard fight ever since then. Matter of fact, when they changed the method of distribution, I remember Mr. W.C. Jarman was the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners at the time, and I went there and spoke at public comment in dissent of the tax rate change on sales tax. And I was given 3 minutes and got hammered out of order. So that's the respect we get, because I talked over the time limit, but anyway.
Well, maybe it's, based upon this that we're having issues with, maybe it's time for a joint meeting to talk about this in a.
Well,
that can certainly happen. When was the last one?
Mayor, I've been here about 3.75 years, and it was before that, so I'd say if you
Well, we're due then.
if you want us to
You get them all together,
give Mr. Foster,
and I'll show you a little trick when we do.
Mr. Ray, concerning our General Assembly, it's their proper protocol that when they are distributing funding to the counties, it's based on per capita.
Absolutely.
So why not have a conversation with the General Assembly, that if this is their method, then why is that not the same in terms of when it reaches the county level, you follow suit that the General Assembly is setting forth?
so
I could pull up on my phone right now, text to Senator Lazar where I said the exact same thing.
Seriously?
And it's, yeah, Dr. Washington,
Right where you're at
so that's the thing that the mayor's been pushing consistently. So the basic presentation method or distribution method from the state is per capita. There are some caveats there, but the main principle of distribution is based on per capita. One of the things that we're working on with our Military Host City Coalition is the fact that all 5 military host counties distribute using the ad valorem method. So if we're talking about being a military host city and the challenges that we have, if each county decides to use the ad valorem method, it's costing every host city significantly inside of their distribution method. For example, our $11 million plus or minus is the same thing that happened to Fayetteville last year when Cumberland County switched over. Fayetteville lost $11 million. So they had to go back and figure out what that number was to them. It's a little different for Fayetteville because their budget is roughly twice our size, but it was still $11 million that they had to figure out. So one thing we are pushing as a coalition is for the state to push, at least in those five counties, to distribute per capita. That's one of the initiatives that we are pushing, and hopefully this week we'll be able to push that a little more when some of us are in Raleigh. I just don't know how that'll work, but I just don't know how this General Assembly works in the first place, so.
Well, it also seems that there should be a cap if it's going to be a hybrid as opposed to, and I can understand probably for some counties, when you think about Currituck County, when you're talking about the Outer Banks and what they might be going through, that's totally different than what Onslow County and your larger counties.
Yeah, as of last year, the split was 52 counties used the ad valorem method, 48 counties used the per capita method in North Carolina. So it's pretty close to a split, and no one has to have a rational thought. Ms. Smith's question is, how does that change? It's pretty simple. The county commission votes, and it takes just a simple majority to pass that, and then they would do it. And I agree, every county is going to be different in their comments. It's just interesting that all 5 military host counties choose the ad valorem because the numbers work out in the county's favor there. So, Mayor, we will, if you're good with that, we can follow up with the county chair, talk about a joint meeting on one side, and then we can continue to push the potential change in sales tax distribution at the state level as well.
I have a comment. This is very good for television consumption. It explains why we may be in a predicament. It doesn't change anything. It won't change until the people sitting around this table support a candidate who supports per capita. And by per capita, we mean that we get the money back based on population that's spent here. And as long as the people sitting around this table support people who are not in favor of that, it's going to continue, and it won't be a campaign issue. If we're in an election year, why is it not a campaign issue? It's not. I don't know about the forums. I'm pretty sure they haven't been asked that question at the forum. Who's the candidates that's supporting it? Who's the candidate that's supporting per capita? You can't tell me, because we haven't made it an issue. So it's good that we explain to the public so they understand that we're in a pickle. But it's not going to change until we insist on that it's a campaign issue. And then the candidates that identify with that position can be supported. And we'll know who they are. And we can call their names. But we can't do that.
Yeah, and it's tough from a staff to staff perspective, Mayor, because just like this, the council's going to set the budget, the council's going to set the tax rate. The staff doesn't do that. Just like at the county, we have that dialogue with them and ask them to present this to the county commission. And once the county commission has a dialogue, if it's not pushed as a priority, then they say, well, we're going to need that revenue this year, so we can look at a different
Well,
point.
we had them right at the edge.
I think so too.
We had them right at the edge this year. What did they say? Remember what did the manager
I
tell
was
you?
going to go back to the text message, Mayor, because I think that's what the response was, but I don't remember. But it just didn't happen, is what I remember, Mayor.
They didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Y'all making it.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think we need to we need to lobby our folks because, I mean, to me, this is a serious
It
issue.
has to be an issue. If they're not talking about it, they're not being elected based upon it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even talk about hybrid. I think we ought to talk about what's most just. That's it. And that's the full 100% per capita.
I would, I would agree with you 100%. Because we're generating it here. We're paying for police, we're paying for fire, we're paying for streets, and it's going for sand. I just can't, if I owned a house on the beach and I had I was renting it out and getting the revenue, then I could afford to pay for sand. But me living in Jacksonville, in Country Club Estates, I don't think I ought to be paying for sand that's going on a beach in Pender County. I just don't, you know.
Well, you know how we ended up in this pickle to start with, right? Weren't you on council then? They got mad at us. It was a purely emotional decision.
A lot of decisions between the county and the city were personality conflicts, including why we didn't result with one government building. That was the plan.
We got punished.
I remember that.
So this is the old Belts building. So we bought this and renovated it. And they still promised to build downtown. That was part of the jail. That was part of the jailhouse deal. They promised to put their government center where the parking lot is. And then they said that the new council is not committed to the promises of the old council. So that's what it said.
There's a few takeaways that we'll work on. One being we will complete that comparison of the current rate and the new rate and the movement within there, and then we'll reach out directly to Mr. Chairman Foster for the county and see about scheduling that discussion for a joint meeting that's been brought up a couple times. And we'll give you updates by email so that you've got it in real time and not have to wait for the 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
All right, so we're going to number
6.
6. Move my screen back up here. Mr. Willingham, this is going to go into your discussion on House Bill 1038. You asked for that to be on the agenda for tonight.
Yeah. And thank you all for cooperating and allowing that to be one of our agenda items. And I kind of felt it was appropriate to have it at the workshop because I think it's a time for listening. And I know we don't have public comments at the workshops. And I thought it was a certain sense of urgency because things were happening at the state level that I was not aware about. Maybe about a week, I've known about what was going on. So we get drawn into this race discussion, and we don't want to talk about race. We want to talk about Jacksonville Harbor. We want to talk about progress. We don't want to talk about race. But we've drawn into it, and so here we go. A few years ago, we were sued by Joe McLaughlin and others over the election system. The city was accused of discriminating against him and others, and I really couldn't understand how they were discriminated against. I'd like to ask the city attorney, did the court in that litigation determine that the plaintiffs had standing?
So there were actually 3 plaintiffs in that lawsuit that sued the city of Jacksonville, and the court ruled that 2 of the 3 lacked standing because they actually lived outside of the districts that were the subject of the lawsuit. The court did rule that the third party had standing. I think it was the third named plaintiff in the case, actually. But they did eventually dismiss that claim as well, because even though that plaintiff, I think it was Ward 4 that plaintiff lived in, that plaintiff did not allege facts that were sufficient. And the court used very legal language there. They said, did not allege facts sufficient to permit an inference that that was racially gerrymandered.
Okay.
So that's where that was.
What is standing?
So standing is basically someone's ability to go into court to litigate a particular issue. So if I had a problem with something that my neighbor was doing, I could go into court and I could say, Judge, I'm going to sue my neighbor because I don't like that they're making extra noise. It's infringing on my right to enjoy my property. And a judge would probably say, all right, you have standing to bring that claim. We can go ahead and hear that in this court today. But if I saw my neighbor and his wife and I didn't like their relationship, I couldn't come into court and say, Judge, I want to make a lawsuit here. I'm going to sue for divorce of this couple. The judge would say, well, you don't have standing to do that. This doesn't really involve you. This doesn't really affect you. That's it in kind of a nutshell. And oftentimes lawsuits are dealt with at that very early stage by a judge just saying, you don't have the right to bring this type of case into this type of court at this time.
Thank you. So that case didn't determine that our election system discriminated against anyone. There's this concept in law, also in tort law, it's about making the plaintiff whole. That means that if you suffer a harm and there's liability, you get made whole. Our case, when we sued the city, was to be made whole. And we had to prove that there was discrimination. And we did that. But if you didn't suffer the discrimination, you don't get made whole. If you're not in a car accident and there's liability, then you don't get compensated. So the remedy can't be discrimination. That's the remedy. And the remedy is directed to the person to suffer. So how can our system discriminate when all of our districts are majority white? Mine, Dr. Washington's, Councilwoman Smith, they're majority white. So why somebody accuses this system or us of discriminating is beyond me. Although we know all of the districts are based on population, the opponents argue that we should use an unconstitutional method of trying to project who votes. That's unconstitutional. It has to be based on population. How do you know who's going to vote? How can you draw a boundary based on who you think might vote? But let's play that game. The opponents say that we should redraw the districts because of low voter turnouts in districts 1 and 4. So that would lead to, if there's low voter turnout across the city, we just cancel the election. It doesn't make sense. Okay, but one of the plaintiffs ran for the 3rd Congressional District in 2017. The 3rd Congressional District in 2017 had 131,167 less voters than the 4th Congressional District by David Price. Okay? Now, there's no problem with that, but you got a problem when my district has 81 fewer voters in 2017. 200. And we have to redo the system. That's the argument. Over those 200, what's the difference? 170-some thousand versus 200. What's the problem? The problem's not with the turnout. The problem's with us. All of our districts are the same in population, roughly, within a certain percentage point. And Councilwoman Washington knows the percentage point. Was it 5?
Plus or minus 5.
There you go. So now all of a sudden they argue that we ought to not include the military, people who have a right to vote. They shouldn't be in Ward 1, shouldn't be in Ward 4. Or if they do get counted, we disperse them amongst the other wards. Okay. Where's Camp Lejeune? Where's the air station? On the east side of 17. Where's Ward 1? Where's Ward 4? On the east side of 17. That's where they should be, in those wards. And you talk about odd mapping, that would result very irregular if you jumped over 1 and 4 and put him on the west side. Okay? And that just brings me to another point, because didn't the Supreme Court just say that Republicans can draw whatever they want? Okay? But they have a problem with how we put Camp Lejeune, TT, and New River Air Station on the east side of 17, where it belongs. It's hypocritical, it's illogical, and it doesn't make sense. I'd like to ask the attorney, if the court determined in my lawsuit against the city of Jacksonville, that the at-large system was determined to be discriminatory.
What was that?
So I've got a copy of a lawsuit I printed out just in case there were questions like this. It's a civil action in federal court in 1989. Mr. Willingham was a plaintiff in that case, as was, it looks like, Ernest J. Wright, Sylvester Howard, Curtis Coleman, Fannie K. Coleman, James C. Brown, Erica B. Buffong, pardon me if I pronounced some names improperly, and Alan D. Hunt. And then the plaintiffs were the city of Jacksonville, and that included named council members, mayor, and then it looks like also Onslow County members of the Board of Elections. And I pulled that lawsuit out. What was the specific question?
Did the court determine that the system, the at-large system, was discriminatory in that case?
Well, so it was kind of strange, actually, because the way the case worked is it looked like the court didn't issue a formal opinion. Instead, it sounds like the matter was settled out of court. And what was settled out of court did result in Jacksonville putting in place a district system with 4 wards. And then as a result of that, there was a dismissal filed by the plaintiffs. And the plaintiff's dismissal does reference the fact that they got basically the relief they were seeking from the lawsuit. Is that correct?
The lawsuit had to determine who was the prevailing party. The judge in that order determined that we were the prevailing party. To be the prevailing party, you have to prove your case, and we proved our case. And the judge established that we were the prevailing party because of that. Our case was about the discriminatory system. So
Yeah, it was strange. The judge issued 2 orders, one granting the plaintiff's motion to voluntarily dismiss, and then there was one on attorney's fees, and that one does say, I see the prevailing parties to the lawsuit
Prevailing, we want,
for the court order there.
so now we're supposed to acquiesce with House Bill 1038, which imposes on us colonial style because we didn't ask for it, as far as I know. Y'all can help me out if y'all asked for this.
To my knowledge, I know I didn't personally ask for it.
We didn't ask for this. Okay? So they're imposing a system on us that a court has already determined is discriminatory. That doesn't make sense. So,
So I apologize, I might have misspoken because I was looking at there's 2 orders, sorry. I'll just quote it. It said, "The plaintiff's counsel had sufficient forecast from the proceedings underway in the city of Jacksonville that there was a likelihood of success. And then in addition, the counsel representing plaintiffs are here being fully compensated for all the services they attributed to the litigation." So I'm sorry if I misspoke.
I don't think you misspoke. The determination that we're the prevailing party means that the system was discriminatory. So why on earth would this council, and I'm not saying you do support it, but I'm saying why would you support something that's already been determined to be discriminatory, especially in light of the fact that this council, but for myself and Councilwoman, and Yanero and Councilwoman Smith, defended the lawsuit successfully when it was attacked as being discriminatory. Y'all stood up, and that was your one city moment. Okay? This is not.
I have a quick question, and this is a matter of just educating me. To initiate the lawsuit, it was basically, we were at an all-at-large count or city electoral type of situation. The reasoning behind the suit was to acknowledge the fact that there were communities under or not being represented. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But it was not, once the lines were drawn, it wasn't drawn just for that community. It was that community plus other communities. You get what I'm saying?
It was 2 sets of lines,
Okay.
if you will.
Okay.
We had a proposal, and the city had a proposal.
Okay.
We liked theirs better, so we went with theirs.
With the 2.
With the 4
with the
districts
4, yeah.
and the 2 at large.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm trying to find out, and just in some questions, and just sitting in the face of several individuals regarding this, when did these 2 wards be considered the minority ward?
They're not minority wards.
I know, but I think that's...
People can label them that way because they choose to label them that way because the result is that we've gotten blacks elected, and so they say minority wards.
So there it goes, okay. And because anyone in those wards can run. I'll just take an example. Your last election, you were contested. And the other individual, the onus was on you guys to get your voters out to vote for you. So
I was contested twice too and lost.
I didn't want to bring it up. I didn't want to hit you like that. Trying to be nice. But I guess my point is that when it comes to, and I don't know why Ward 1 and 4 are being targeted, and I say targeted based off of videos and conversations that I just haven't been privy to. So the myth is that it doesn't take much for you guys to get elected as it would for the other wards to get, the other 2 wards along with at-large to be elected, when that's just not the case. It's the voter turnout.
Because you can't campaign that way.
You can't.
You
have
can't
to-
campaign. Some people in here to help you campaign. We probably spent more money than anybody on campus, Jim, because we wanted to see what could be done out there.
How much you spend? No, let me stop. I mean, but I bring it up only because the fact that, even though it's low voter turnout, to me, that's voter education. That's, and it could easily, if I didn't know, I would think that, well, maybe their ward doesn't have as many in my ward as far as the per capita, for my ward and yours, I got 10,000, you got 5,000. That's not the case.
No.
So.
And it's actually harder to campaign. It's like if you fishing in a pond in your backyard versus fishing in an ocean. Because you got all these people that are possible candidates that you still try to reach.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And, I sat here and I've heard from a lot of people about, we need to go to at large. And I know there's a number of people that think we need to stay with the ward system. And, in light of Louisiana versus Callis, and even when we're talking about this lawsuit, I think that as far as me, I would like to see, one, us postpone any decisions that we have to make today and give an opportunity for public comment, and also give the attorney some time to look at that Louisiana versus Callis decision, because, anything we do subjects us to a lawsuit. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that as we move forward, that we're not putting ourselves into a lawsuit by, because what I can see with that decision, that Supreme Court decision, is to have some impact on this, is to have some impact based upon, looking at our wards or looking at an at-large. And to me, I would say we need some time. And I understand that, I don't know, my experience with the legislature is it moves very, very slow.
That's if they wanted to.
Thank you.
The thing is, it doesn't matter what we decide here at this table.
No.
The bill is there.
Yeah.
And we didn't initiate it. At least I can only speak for myself. I didn't initiate it. So I think I would want to know, as a member of this council, is the council by majority in support of it? And if we're not in support of it, then we need to take on the next step on what we need to do.
But I don't think, and I'll take Mr. Councilman Willingham's, some consensus with those folks. So maybe it requires us to have a discussion with our legislatures before we start drawing our line in the sand, because strategically, we need to look at Louisiana versus Callis. And, some of this is going to take some time. And I want to hear from community members. And
I totally agree.
And we don't have, having the opportunity to have public comment, I think is important. And, we didn't advertise for public comment today. And, we may have 500 people. I sat in a council meeting, I don't know, I think you might have been on the council, that we were here till 2 o'clock in the morning listening to public comment. And, but to me, I want to hear from what people have to say and their reasoning for, one, whether we go all at large, or two, because when I campaigned on listening to the public, and listening to what our constituents has to say, and they don't have the opportunity to talk today. And again, maintaining consistency, I don't think we should give it to them today. But in 2 weeks from now, if people want to come and give their 2 cents, because to me, if we say, oh no, we're not going to support this, and the majority of our constituents want us to support it, it's important for me to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, and I hear that too, because I totally agree with you. I guess I'm being a little sarcastic in this way, because those who submitted the bill didn't even want to hear from us.
Well, maybe, but maybe it's time to have it.
And the conversation was missed.
I know.
because
That's a good point.
The conversation was missed, so.
I mean, I would agree with you, and maybe it's a time for our staff and us to reach out to our delegation and say, well, why did you do that? But I mean, this came out last week. Both of those things came out last week. I was surprised, as everyone else, that bill was passed. And then, on top of that, came that Louisiana versus Callis. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for, as we move forward? I don't know.
Let me say this. We weren't pressing for, first of all, I never thought that there would be any split over this from council, particularly since council defended the action. Just defended it. So what has changed? You defended a lawsuit about this. So what has changed? So I never thought there'd be any split about it. I know you're new to the council, but I wasn't eager to have a vote on this today.
Well, I hope so. I think we.
I wanted to discuss it,
Yeah.
and the public discourse can benefit from a discussion, because a lot of people don't know the history, and so putting the public in a position of choosing sides and not understanding what's going on before they form whatever position they want to form. But for me, our rights aren't up for bid. Okay? These civil rights, I don't care if 50 million people say, do something that's wrong. It's just not up for bid. But we do have the custom and policy of, public comment. But to answer your question, to answer your other question, that was a question that I had for the attorney. And that question is whether that case impacts the HB 1038.
I don't know.
We'll find out.
And I think it's going to take us some time it's going to take the attorney some time to do some research. And what I heard right now about that other case is, I think we need to have some time.
This is the question. Whether 1038 impacts whether we choose an at-large system or a ward system. That's the question. She can let her answer.
Go ahead.
Oh, what was the question?
Whether we have a at-large system or ward system is impacted by this case.
Okay, so it's going to require a lot more legal analysis than I'm prepared to give tonight. So the problem is there are attorneys much smarter than I am at much higher pay grades than I have who are right now busy at their desks trying to figure out how this new Supreme Court case is going to affect us. The big law that no one's talked about yet is the Voting Rights Act. And the Voting Rights Act was mentioned, I know, in the lawsuit that we've been referencing that changed the system from 1989 from all at large to wards. And it was mentioned in the lawsuit that was more recent that, as you pointed out, two were dismissed for lack of standing and one was dismissed for lack of stating a claim upon which relief could be granted. And both those cases talk about the Voting Rights Act, as does the new Supreme Court case. I'm looking a little bit at Miss Moore back there because she's been one of my mentors throughout my years. And unfortunately, even though lawyers can do an analysis, they're never really going to be able to tell you what a court is going to do. And I think this will be litigated. The Supreme Court case itself remanded the underlying case back to a lower court. It said we are basically talking about the Voters' Rights Act and we're interpreting it in a new way, and we are establishing a new threshold for whenever folks are bringing claims on racial gerrymandering. And now that we've established a new interpretation of the Voters' Rights Act, you guys in the lower courts, go ahead and implement that as you see fit. So I can tell you I can research more, but everyone else is researching it as well right now. And the answer I have for you is, unfortunately, it is not super clear how, if at all, that's going to affect our legislature. And even if our legislature is really paying close attention and listening to their lawyers and doing what their lawyers are saying, it still doesn't guarantee that a lawsuit against our legislature is going to come down on one side or the other on this. So I'm sorry.
But from my standpoint, I think strategically, we need to know, I mean, and I'm sure you can get the School of Government to participate as well. How do we make our best estimate as to what our course of action would be?
Well, and the interesting thing is this isn't a course of action for us. So I tried to come a little bit prepared today. I did pull out a great School of Government article about modifying our own charter, right? About what we could do as a council if we were to go pass an ordinance to change to at-large, or if we were to pass an ordinance that said we want to change the ward-based system and redistrict some of these wards and things like that. And I mean, this lady at the School of Government did a whole question and answer session about that, and it is as thick as you can imagine. And then and that's all about what we can do as a council. Then the very last question is, does this limitation she's been discussing apply to the General Assembly? And the answer is just 2 lines out of these 20 pages. No. The General Assembly may amend a city's charter at any time and in any way that it wishes to. So the advice I have for you today is we're facing a legislative action on a bill that, frankly, as a council, we have very little control over. We can certainly, and we have in the past, come to a consensus about whether or not we're in favor of this or whether or not we are not in favor of this. But beyond that, the legislature has that authority.
So basically, we're in that place where someone else has made a decision on how us as elected officials for the city should operate, basically.
That's correct. That is correct. They've not done any of these things that we can do on our own with these ordinances.
Right.
They've gone straight to what they can do as the legislature, which is quite a bit.
Right. And at this point, and like, and this is to Councilman Ganero's point, of course we want to hear what the public has to say. Of course we want to go into discussion and say that we have, is that me? Because there's always me. That we have time. Well, if it's in a place that we have actually no authority on as far as how it goes up or whatever is said, in my conversation with Representative Shepherd, at the end of that conversation, the hopes is that it would be amended in such a way that since we don't have a say on it already, why not amend it so that the city can vote on what the city wants? They voted us in. So can an amendment be placed on that bill to put the authority or the weight back into the voters' hands, vice the county, the representatives making that decision for us?
So that's also certainly an option. So a city can change its charter. There's basically 3 ways that a city charter gets changed. And a charter is what's going to lay out what type of election system we have. And the 3 ways those can be changed are via the legislature itself, saying you're going to change it and this is how you're going to change it. Via the city council that sits here today, saying we're going to go through an amendment to our ordinances process and by ordinance change the way we do elections. And the third way is via a referendum. That's when the public votes. Now, a referendum can start by petition of the general population, and a referendum can also be ordered by the general legislature. So the legislature could amend this proposed House bill at any point to change it to saying, we're going to order a referendum, or in any number of ways that I'm not even going to speculate to, that they could also change it. Because remember, they've got the most power to go ahead and decide this issue without the public's input, and even against sometimes public input and council input.
And now, is that in the hand of those who sponsor, or is that once it goes through committee for vote?
So you mean the ability to amend that bill?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So the ability to amend that bill can come at almost any phase of the process. And it's done via vote in some of those committees. It's done sometimes just via an individual saying, this is my bill. I've decided I'm going to withdraw it. They have that authority too.
Madam Attorney, let me ask something for clarification. So with the ward system that we currently have in the city of Jacksonville, we have a ward system where there's 4 distinct wards, wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, correct?
Correct.
So when there is an election, only individuals that live in Ward 1 can vote for Ward 1. Individuals that live in Ward 2 can vote for Ward 2. Ward 3 and Ward 4 candidates, but the 2 at large, as long as you live anywhere within the cities within those 4 wards, anyone can vote for the at large. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So please explain to the public, if you can, what is the difference between our ward system and the ward system at the state level, how we elect our officials, and how we elect our congressional delegates to go to Washington, D.C.? Is it not the same system?
So I would say it's apples to oranges. We tend to historically, and I can't speak to everything in the
I have a
past.
quote.
but-
I can speak to it.
Can I just finish real fast the thought?
Yes,
So we tend to historically take census data
Yes.
and use that whenever we're talking about our wards.
Right.
And there's any number of ways that wards can be established
Right.
on legislative levels and congressional levels. Those can be done, in some ways the law has even said it's fine to do gerrymandering based on political, right, and things of that nature. So I would have a hard time kind of weighing in on the differences, except to say, again, with congressional things like that, they're usually set out by the folks who have control over those types of national things. And here, I don't think, and I may be wrong about this, but I don't think the federal government could tell us necessarily where to draw those boundaries or what kind of elections we could have. I think that's still a power reserved by the state. And in that case, it would be the legislature or the power that's delegated by the state to local governments. And the legislature has delegated to the city council, I think it's 160A, 101, and 102, the authority for us to do some of those things ourselves through ordinance.
In our most recent lawsuit case, it was mentioned by our former city attorney, Mr. Carter, that the plaintiff's complaint had both legal and factual flaws. The article goes on to talk about former Mayor George Jones says, compared to what our nation's forefathers and our states did when they set up the election systems for our members of the United States House of Representatives and members of the North Carolina House of Representatives. They set up voting districts, same as wards. So it's really a pattern after our federal and state election system.
So I'm sorry, are you quoting an article or a deposition?
This was part of when initially the lawsuit was filed for the city of Jacksonville in the article, and our former attorney and our former mayor was talking about the benefits
Okay,
that the
okay.
ward system
I see.
had brought to the city of Jacksonville.
Okay.
And having our ward system locally is no different than if you live in District 14, you can only vote for that individual to go to the North Carolina General Assembly. If you live in Congressional District number 3, you can only vote for that individual if you live in that district. In other words, if I lived in Congressional District number 4, I could not vote for that House of Representative candidate to go to Washington, D.C. I only can vote for the congressional district that I live in.
Sure.
That's the same thing with our ward system.
I think everyone would agree probably that analysis, right, is analogous. Those two things are similar, and that whatever you're districted for is what you can vote for. Unfortunately, I don't know the context, and I can't speak for Mr. Carter or Mr. Jones, though.
But this was part of that most recent lawsuit in which the former council gave authorized Mr. Carter to seek legal counsel, and we won that lawsuit, the second lawsuit with this.
Yeah.
So I have another question that I wanted to ask you. When the city of Jacksonville won this most recent lawsuit, did the plaintiffs have an opportunity to file an appeal?
Okay, so we're going back to making sure I understand. We're talking about the most recent lawsuit being the one that
In 22
pull it out.
and
That would
22?
have been the one that's captioned primarily McLaughlin.
Yes.
Versus the city of Jacksonville.
Yes.
Okay, and so you're asking in that question, would they have an opportunity to appeal?
Yes, at the time that the judge ruled in favor of the city of Jacksonville.
So there's almost always an opportunity to appeal a case.
Is there a statute of limitations?
For appeals, it's not called a statute of limitations, but there's statutes that bar the amount of time in which they could appeal. And I'd have to double check, but it's my understanding they didn't appeal
Okay, so
the
here's
court's dismissal.
Here's my next question for you. Does the General Assembly have a right or the right to overturn a federal judge's decision?
Oh, boy, okay, so the ability, boy. It's kind of a question of when I was a kid, I'd always say, Dad, can I do this? And he'd say, I don't know, can you? The question
We
is,
just
may
want
I,
it.
right? My
I'm just
dad gets
simply
to say I
asking.
may. So the legislature can do just about anything. I mean, they can write up a bill tomorrow and pass it that says that the moon is now pink, right? Now, whether or not they have the ability to do it doesn't necessarily mean whether or not they should do it or whether or not it can withstand a lawsuit. But I have not, and I will not weigh in on what I would recommend the legislature do, because they have their own attorneys, and they would not want me stepping on their toes.
I have another question for you. So if I am the plaintiff in this case, and I have not appealed, because I have not appealed, could I then ask the General Assembly to enact a law in which I want it to be appealed? And does that not violate my right? Because if I'm not happy with the judge's ruling, then I should have appealed the case in the beginning.
Okay, so yeah, now you're bringing me, you guys are really challenging me tonight. I appreciate this. First of all, I want to make it clear, I am not giving legal advice specific to any council members, nor am I giving legal advice to the majority of the council. I'm trying to speak as best I can on fact and not advice, just on what the facts are. So we have a checks and balances system in local government and in national government where there is a legislative, executive, and judicial function. And the question you've asked is as old as the time the Constitution was completed, because absolutely, there are times where a court will say, this is my interpretation of the law, and now that interpretation becomes law. Anytime there's a judicial ruling, it becomes what's known as common law as opposed to legislative law. It becomes case law, which is binding, right? But at any time, a legislature can say, I don't like that opinion that judge ordered. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to now issue a law that basically would make it so that in the future that same lawsuit could be filed and it could be won because now it's explicit what the legislature is saying. And in a way, they're sort of overruling the judiciary. And the checks and balances on that are always the Constitution. So that's a very long way of saying yes. It's a very long way of saying if somebody lost in front of a judge, a legislature could then pass a new law in which someone could then win that same set of facts in front of a judge, because the law would change.
Let me add something. The Louisiana case involving Calais had nothing to do with the at-large system or whether we could choose an at-large system over a ward system. That case was how you draw the lines. That's what that case was about. So it does not impact HB 1038 because it has nothing to do with whether it's an at-large or a ward system. If it is a district system, then you have to meet whatever standard they established in that Supreme Court case. So there are a lot of benefits that we've had from having neighborhood representation, because that's what we have, neighborhood representation. That's the most effective democracy that you can have, because you have democracy at the lowest level when you have your neighborhoods represented. And part of the lawsuit that we filed was because that was not the case. And you had everybody coming from one part of town. And when that happened, just let me give you some examples. Neighborhood representation benefited Jacksonville. Before there were wards, the city didn't care about Pickettstown or Georgetown, okay? Before there were wards, Riverwalk Crossing was a rat-infested warehouse. Series of rat-infested, they know, okay? Before we had neighborhood representation, there was dominant slum and blight in downtown residential communities. Before we had wards, there were no splash pads, no professional level baseball field in the river. Before wards, there were no public safety station. And I don't know if the chief remembers, but everybody didn't agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We had opposition, and I think I played a role in the fact that we got it. And I can give you some design features that are in there as a result of that. The shading on the south side of the building, for one, to reduce heat loss. So we've had these benefits. Before there were wards, there was no land application treatment center that helped, a system that helped clean the New River. The ward system prevented an attempt to give Kerr Street Recreation Center away. Okay? Before there were wards, there was no television of city council meetings. And these things weren't inevitable. Having neighborhood representation made a difference. So when we discuss, we can vote on a ward system, you're voting on a system that has already been declared discriminatory. Why would we want to do that? For what? Why are we even here? We should be talking about Jacksonville Harbor. But we got a race battle that people want to drag us into. And the benefit of discussion for me was not to poll and see if we can switch a system that has been working, is that we could unite as a council and say to the legislature that in a year when we're celebrating 250 years of colonial independence. We're not your colony. Because if we accept being the colony where someone outside can dictate what we do, you're also accepting that your voluntary annexation is up next. And you won't have voluntary annexation because it's been promised. Phil Shepherd came before you and said that if he had known you could do it, he would have stopped it. Okay? And we sit around here and we talk about tax revenue and how we're going to, voluntary annexation is a way we grow. Okay? So go along with him if you want to, but I guarantee you that's next if we do this. So the intent was, like I said, I didn't know that there was dissension about the voting system that we have. Okay, that's news to me. Because of the history that you all supported it and defended it. So the intent, from my point of view, was that we express our disapproval with actions that weren't initiated by us, that control us, colonial style. And we communicate that. Y'all, you act like, and it is true, that most local bills pass. And local bills, if you don't know, they're a form of pork. And that's what conservatives complain about. And what it means is that if I want something for my district, no matter what it is, if it's unconstitutional or whatever, no matter what it is, everybody else turns their back and go ahead and do it. And they want the privilege to be able to do that. And it's not efficient government. It's pork barrel government where your tax monies could be used for any kind of purpose that they choose because it doesn't go through the normal process and people aren't watching. They let each delegate get away with it. So if it's not something that we initiated or support, the course of action shouldn't be to throw up our hands. It should be to, we're going to be in Raleigh for 2 days, some of us. It should be to talk to the legislatures and talk to the league that is supposed to lobby for us if it's not something that we want. So this is not inevitable in my mind, and it just takes unity in one of those one city moments, in my opinion. And we express to the caucuses that might be relevant to this, that this is not something that we support, and the whole General Assembly can vote against it, possibly. I'm not saying it's likely, because we know how these things go. But that's what a unified city that is really concerned about those one city moments would do, in my opinion. So one city got to be more than just a slogan, okay? If these people around the room don't feel it's one city, okay, that's a concern that everybody should be concerned about. And doing this split thing where we sign on for something that we've already determined, that the judicial system has already determined is discriminatory, is I think is an offense, personally. So that's all I got to say.
I just have something real quick. From your statement, and I don't need to target this, I just need it for clarity. You mentioned electors, individuals were elected from one part of town. Before the ward system took place, that was the case as far as where individuals were voted from? Okay, so.
And let me add this.
Okay.
The ward system is inherently, the at-large system is inherently unfair. And it's meant to be that way. It's meant so the dominant community can choose every single seat. That's why you have 5 votes. It never occurred to anyone that you should have 1 vote and the top 5 should get in. That's the fair way to do it. But they give 5 votes to everybody because they can outvote you 5-1 on every single seat, and you get nobody. And that's what has historically happened. It's no accident that what we've done for 36 years, okay, we've had representation from 1 and 4. Where's the county's comparison? 8 years of Ernie Wright, and he got defeated twice? That's not one city, that's not one county, that's not anything that we can brag about. So, okay.
No, I just wanted to make sure I understood that statement. I just have something I'd like to read, and this is my final word on it, on the whole situation as far as tonight. The ward system is not just an election structure. It is a community accountability model. It ensures each section of Jacksonville has a direct advocate who understands its streets, infrastructure gaps, neighborhood concerns, public safety needs, and civic priorities. One city does not mean one voice. One city means every neighborhood has a voice at the table. HB 1038 would replace Jacksonville's hybrid ward at-large system with all at-large council elections beginning 2027. HB 1038 will reduce, it causes a reduction in neighborhood representation, a top-down change to the local governance structure, a risk to minorities, renters, military families, seniors, and lower turnout neighborhoods' voice, and moves that could make campaigns more expensive and less accessible to grassroots candidates. One city does not mean one voice. One city, our city, my city, is a voice of every neighborhood having an opportunity to say what they want. And to follow suit on someone's initiative, I can say someone because I don't know who initiated HB 1038. I do know that Representative Gable was the primary sponsor, but it doesn't mean that he initiated. And I can't accuse anyone because of past litigations that they were the ones that submitted it. What I do know is that it's there. And we can either give the authority that we have as elected personnel or elected officials here in Jacksonville, we can give that authority for them to make a decision on how we are elected and then follow suit with every other change they want to make without our consent. Now, we just spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I don't know, it felt like 3, about a budget that we knew tonight we weren't going to make a decision about. But then it comes to this 1083 that affects all of us. It doesn't just, 1038. What time is it? It's probably 1038. It's probably 10:30. It doesn't just affect Ward 1 and Ward 4, although for whatever reason they're targeted. It affects all of us. And we already have 2 at-large seats. I believe that's all we need. And the city does need to be structured in such a way that each ward has that those numbers that equate and balance itself out. When it comes to elections, no matter where you are, the onus is on you to get your voters to vote for you. But Jacksonville has adopted a system that said we need to know what they think. Our actions should be based off what they want done, not what someone who doesn't live in our city wants done. And that's where my problem is. So I know we're not voting on this because if we voted, it didn't matter because this is legislative. It's a House bill. Our vote here means nothing. But we do need to know whether or not our council is going to join together against it or not. Because it lets me know what my next move is. I have absolutely no problem in going up to Raleigh at any point in time and talking to those and stating the case. I know I can't state it on behalf of council, But I can state it on behalf of the fact that I've been in this city since 2003, and I love this city. And the fact that we had a nonpartisan council is one of the reasons why I fell in love with it, because I wasn't fighting and battling political divides. I wasn't fighting and battling white, black. No, it was about who the people wanted to represent them. And I just think we would, as a council, do an injustice to each other by not finding out where we stand on this. Either we're going to be for it, either others are going to be for it, because I can tell you now I'm not for it, or we can stand as a united front and say, regardless of what happens in Jacksonville, we are the ones that need to be making that decision, not someone who doesn't live in the city. And that's all I have.
Ms. Evers, you were next in the line.
We've had a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion tonight, all very good and all very important to put on the table. I agree with Michael in that what's not on the table is good legal analysis yet of what all the impacts of all these things will be. And the acid test is going to be in a courtroom, not in a council workshop or in the legislature. No matter what the legislators do, it's going to have to stand up to legal scrutiny. I guarantee you there will be a lawsuit no matter which way that thing goes. It's going to be challenged and it will be decided in the courts. Based on statements from our legislative delegation, I can tell you this originated from citizens in our city. It was not presented by council, but by citizens. And it's not one individual. There's a cohort of people who think this is something that should be looked at. So based on that, I think that more public input is required. Regardless of the outcome, we don't have to give and we can't give the General Assembly our permission or our consensus on something. I mean, give our opinion, a consensus and an opinion, but they don't need our permission to do anything. They have all of the legal authority and we don't, as you stated very well. We can't stop it, we can't start it, we can't, whatever they do, they do. And then it gets challenged in court and we wait to see what happens, and that's how it plays out. It always plays out that way. But I also think that when you've got citizens in your community questioning this, that they have a voice as well, and having time for public comment and time for both sides to air their concerns is going to be helpful not only for us, but also for our General Assembly folks. And the delegation, there has been some talk, as you might have heard, I don't know, I have heard, there's been some talk about that amendment. I didn't see it filed as of today when I looked, but they are talking about amending that piece of legislation to put it on the ballot. That is in conversation, so that may happen soon, which would shake and change how the dust settles on some of these things. But I think we need our citizens to have a chance to express their opinions either way, tell us what they think either way, and then depending on what the legislator does with an amendment or not an amendment, that will tell us a lot about what happens next and how it plays out until it gets to court, where it will be challenged and ultimately interpreted by folks in robes with lots of degrees.
I have a comment I want to make. Going back to something personal, having been born and raised right here in the city of Jacksonville. Is he okay?
He's just standing up.
Okay. And I grew up in St. Julia AME Zion Church on Kerr Street. And one of the things that I can remember as a child is listening to my pastors talking about the opportunity to vote. I can remember my church secretary, who was also my second grade teacher, Mrs. Osha Wilson, at Clyde Urban Elementary School, telling the parishioners when it's time to vote and that your vote means something. I used to ride with my mom to New River Jack AME Recreation Center because that's where my parents voted. And I didn't understand all the complexities of what she and my father were doing when they went into the recreation center, but I just knew that they were voting for something. It has such an impact on me that I was 18 and a half years of age when I registered to vote in Onslow County. And no matter where I've lived, I have always done my due diligence to exercise my right to vote. What gives me pause at this moment, our very first mayor of the city of Jacksonville was elected back in 1896. So basically from 1896 until now, you're talking about 130 years. Now just sit with that for a moment. 130 years. Out of that 130 years, 94 years, nobody that looks like me was able to serve on this council. Think about that. Just think about that. Now imagine you have to switch places with me and now my history becomes your history. So for 94 years, you didn't have somebody representing you. It's only been 36 years, only 36 years that African Americans and people of color could actually serve on this Jacksonville City Council. So basically that means for 72% of our mayor and city council, nobody a person of color could ever serve. It was only because a lawsuit gave us that right, when in fact, it should have been my right just as a United States-born citizen. But even that, people of color had to fight for. 36 years. And we're angry because people of color have only served for 36 years while you have served for 130 years. Your vote has never been impacted. It's never been restricted. As a matter of fact, in 130 years, when has a person who is white not been elected? Your competition may have beat you, but still, your face was at the helm of the city. And now we're angry that in 36 years, our council is changing to be inclusive versus exclusive, and we're angry about 36 years? We're angry about that. And yet that's supposed to be okay. You're telling us we don't matter. You want to minimize, dismiss, devalue, disenfranchise, and marginalize, and that's supposed to be accepting. 2 lawsuits, and we're still trying to find a way to suppress the representation. And that is supposed to be accepting. Because on July 4th, we're going to celebrate 250 years. And what exactly are we celebrating? What are we celebrating? The fact that this is one of the greatest nations on earth, but yet we want to divide the citizens that make it so great? Is that where we are? Is this really who the city of Jacksonville is? When you take off your mask, is this really who you are? We have many families whose compositions aren't just black and just white. We have different ethnic backgrounds of family members. The compositions of families are changing. And we want to tell our children You got to choose the box because your dad might be white, but if you're a little bit too tan, that's not how America's going to see you. But yet that's still my dad. I can't change what's in my DNA. I can't change my skin color. So this is what we are about. This is who we become. Because your silence is complicit. You may not say that you disagree, but if you're not standing up, is your silence not complicit that you do agree? We have too many lawsuits that have already decided that this is not fair, this is not just, and this is not right. And if council, less than 3 years ago, was willing to support the war system, council should be even the more to fight with zeal to keep it in place and not destroy it. That's all I have to say.
All right, so we're going to move on now. I think that we've talked a little bit tonight about this, discussed. I think Mr. Rainier is right that we need to get some more background, more information, more legal research, and come back to it. But with that, Mr. Manager, we're going to push number 7 out for another time. And,
I wanted to talk about the trees.
you're going to have to wait your turn on that
I like our street-covered trees.
one. No more cleanup and leave. Let's go to, I need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Remove.
Okay.
You should have walked out.
Oh, man.